Something strange is happening with the world's money, and your wallet is about to feel it. China holds $3.2 trillion in U.S. assets, Treasury bonds, corporate debt, mortgage securities, currency reserves. That's more dollar exposure than any other nation on Earth. For decades, economists told us this was mutual dependence. China needs America's market. America needs China's financing, a stable partnership. But the data tells a different story. In September 2025, China's Treasury holdings dropped to $700 billion, the lowest level since 2009. They've dumped $570 billion from their historic peak of $1.3 trillion. That's not portfolio adjustment. That's systematic liquidation. And it's accelerating. In 2022, China reduced Treasury holdings by $173 billion. In 2023, $50 billion. In 2024, $57 billion. The pattern is clear, deliberate, irreversible. But the Treasury numbers only tell 20% of the story. The real number is hidden across 5 asset classes. U.S. corporate bonds worth $300 to $500 billion. Currency reserves sitting as raw dollars, another $5 to $700 billion. Mortgage-backed securities, the same toxic assets that nearly destroyed the global economy in 2008. China bought hundreds of billions when they were cheap. Current holdings, $200 billion. Then there's equity, sovereign wealth funds, state-owned enterprises, investment vehicles buried in offshore accounts. BlackRock estimates Chinese state-linked entities hold between $1 and $1.5 trillion in total U.S. equity exposure. Added together, the total dollar exposure sits somewhere between 2.8 and 3.5 trillion. The commonly cited figure is 3.2 trillion, not because it's exact, because it's the midpoint estimate that analysts agree represents China's total dollar trap. Everyone thinks China's dollar holdings protect America. The data says they're building an escape route, and your savings are caught in the middle. If you've ever wondered why your country's currency feels less stable every year, this is the invisible war behind it. While Western media focused on Treasury sales, something else was happening. Quietly, methodically, for 10 consecutive months. China was buying gold. In August 2025, the State Administration of Foreign Exchange announced China's gold reserves hit 74 million ounces. That's 2,302 tons, worth approximately $250 billion. Gold now represents 7% of China's total foreign exchange reserves, up from less than 2% a decade ago. But here's what researchers found. The official numbers are likely understated by 40 to 60%. China is one of the world's largest gold producers. They mine approximately 400 tons annually. None of it gets exported. All of it disappears into state vaults. The accounting never appears in official reserve reports. Analysts estimate China's true gold holdings are somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 tons. That would make them the largest or second largest sovereign gold holder on Earth, rivaling the United States. Why gold? Liu Chunsheng, economist at the Central University of Finance and Economics, explained it simply. Moderately cutting U.S. treasuries while adding gold reduces over-reliance on dollar assets and enhances stability. Gold exists outside the dollar system. It can't be frozen by executive order, can't be sanctioned by Congress, can't be inflated away by Federal Reserve policy. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, the United States and European allies froze $280 billion in Russian reserves. Just took them. Russia couldn't access their own money. China watched and understood the message. Any nation holding dollars is vulnerable to Western financial weapons. Gold is insurance against that vulnerability. But gold was only phase 1. What they're building next is far more sophisticated. And most Western economists missed it entirely until 2025. In 2015, China launched something called CIPS, the Cross-Border Interbank Payment System. By 2025, it's processing $5.6 trillion per quarter and bypassing SWIFT entirely. CIPS allows Chinese banks and foreign banks to settle transactions in Yuan without touching the dollar system. No correspondent banks. No U.S. regulatory oversight. No American approval required. As of November 2025, CIPS processes over 40 trillion yuan quarterly. That's $5.6 trillion. Still smaller than SWIFT's 150 trillion, but growing at 30% per year. Walk into a trading floor in Shanghai. Screens show CIPS transactions flowing. Hong Kong to Moscow, Beijing to Riyadh, Shenzhen to Sao Paulo. Not a single dollar involved. China has also signed bilateral currency swap agreements with 32 central banks globally. These agreements allow direct yuan for local currency exchanges without converting through dollars. Russia, Brazil, Argentina, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Pakistan, 32 nations. Total value exceeds 500 billion. The goal is simple. Create a yuan trade bloc where Chinese imports and exports are priced and settled in yuan, not dollars. If China buys oil from Saudi Arabia in yuan, and Saudi Arabia uses those yuan to buy Chinese manufactured goods, the entire transaction bypasses the dollar. No dollar demand. No need to hold dollar reserves. In 2024, a Brazilian soybean exporter switched to yuan settlement. His reason was practical. Dollar transactions took 3 days through correspondent banks. Yuan took 4 hours through CIPS. And no U.S. approval required. 30% of China's trade is now settled in yuan, up from 14% in 2019, less than 1% in 2010. That's the fastest currency internationalization in modern history. Federal Reserve data from May 2025 shows Chinese banks' dollar-denominated cross-border lending declined 10% since 2022, replaced by yuan. For countries tired of dollar dependency, yuan settlement offers an alternative. But there's a price. Because this system wasn't built for fairness. It was built for control. Even CIPS is old technology. The real weapon is invisible, and it's already live in 260 million digital wallets. The digital yuan. In April 2025, the People's Bank of China announced enhanced cross-border financial services in Shanghai, prioritizing yuan payments, blockchain integration, real-time settlement. The digital yuan allows China to bypass SWIFT, Western banking systems, and even physical currency, while tracking every transaction in real time. In 2024, a Nigerian importer received payment in digital yuan. No bank account needed, no wire transfer delay, no correspondent bank fees. The transaction settled in 11 seconds. Developing nations facing dollar shortages can access yuan credit lines through digital currency systems. Instant liquidity, no IMF conditions, no World Bank oversight. But the catch is simple. China sees every purchase, every seller, every financial relationship. This is financial surveillance disguised as financial freedom. And it's spreading to 60-plus nations through Belt and Road deals. Traditional banking operates on privacy principles. Your bank knows your transactions. But competitor banks don't. Governments need warrants. Digital yuan operates differently. The People's Bank of China is the issuer, the clearinghouse, and the surveillance node. Every transaction flows through Beijing. For authoritarian regimes, this is attractive. Track dissidents. Monitor capital flight. Control economic behavior. For democracies, it's a Faustian bargain. Access to yuan liquidity in exchange for financial transparency to a foreign government. But the digital yuan solves a problem Beijing has struggled with for 15 years. How to make the yuan attractive internationally when China's capital markets are closed and the currency isn't freely convertible? Answer: don't open the capital account. Just build a parallel digital system that bypasses traditional banking entirely. In March 2023, something unprecedented happened in Riyadh. China and Saudi Arabia signed a deal that shook the petrodollar system. Saudi Arabia agreed to accept yuan for oil purchases from China. That might sound minor. It's not. The petrodollar system has been the foundation of American financial dominance since 1974. Oil priced in dollars. Oil sold for dollars. Dollars recycled into U.S. Treasuries. This created permanent global demand for dollars. Every country needs oil. To buy oil, you need dollars. To get dollars, you sell goods to America or borrow in dollar markets. China is the world's largest oil importer. Over 10 million barrels per day. If even half of that shifts to yuan settlement, that's 5 million barrels daily no longer requiring dollars. Multiply that by 365 days. By $80 per barrel average. That's $146 billion per year in reduced dollar demand, just from China's oil imports alone. But the real impact is symbolic. If Saudi Arabia accepts yuan, other producers follow. Russia already does. 95% of Russia-China trade is conducted in yuan or rubles after sanctions forced them off the dollar system. Iran sells oil to China in yuan. Venezuela accepts yuan. Iraq is negotiating yuan contracts. Over 50% of China's cross-border transactions are now settled in yuan, up from negligible levels a decade ago. Reuters reported in April 2025 that China is ramping up its global yuan push as the dollar retreats. The People's Bank emphasized cross-border yuan systems amid what they called unilateralism and protectionism affecting supply chains. That's diplomatic language for America weaponized the dollar. We're building an alternative. Central University economists explain the strategy clearly. China needs reduced reliance on the U.S. economy to strengthen financial autonomy, in line with renminbi internationalization pursuit. For nations outside Western alliances, this offers freedom from dollar hegemony. For the West, it's the slow death of financial dominance. But China's strategy has a fatal flaw, and the timeline is collapsing faster than Beijing planned. China started this escape plan in 2008, after the financial crisis revealed how fragile the dollar system was, how exposed China had become. 17 years later, they're only 25% of the way to full diversification. China's foreign exchange reserves total $3 trillion as of August 2025. The dollar's percentage of those reserves has dropped to 25%, down from 59% in 2016. That sounds like progress, but the math reveals the problem. At current pace, full dollar exit requires another 20 to 30 years. Target date, 2045 to 2055. But the U.S. national debt crisis suggests dollar collapse within 5 to 10 years. The timeline doesn't work. It's like watching a prisoner digging an escape tunnel while the prison catches fire. Even if they dig fast enough, the smoke might reach them first. China has three options. Option 1. Accelerate diversification. Dump treasuries faster. Buy more gold. Push yuan adoption aggressively. Problem: this crashes the dollar immediately, destroying their remaining holdings. Option 2. Maintain slow pace. Reduce exposure gradually over decades. Hope the dollar remains stable long enough for orderly exit. Problem: U.S. debt trajectory makes this unlikely. Option 3. Stabilize the dollar. Keep buying treasuries. Support the system. Prolong their own trap. Problem: this contradicts their entire strategic goal. And here's what economists found. China is choosing option 1, accelerating the exit despite the risks, because they've seen classified projections about U.S. debt that haven't been made public. While everyone watches China's treasury sales, the real bomb is ticking inside the U.S. government's own budget. As of November 2025, U.S. national debt stands at $38 trillion, accumulating at $2 trillion per year. Interest costs are approaching $1 trillion annually. That's 14% of total federal spending, more than the defense budget, and it's accelerating. Every time the Federal Reserve raises interest rates to fight inflation, the government's borrowing costs increase. The U.S. Treasury must refinance approximately $8 trillion in debt annually. When rates rise, that refinancing becomes exponentially more expensive. If rates stay at current levels, interest costs hit $1.2 trillion by 2027. If rates rise to 6%, interest costs hit $1.5 trillion. At 7%, nearly $2 trillion. That's more than Medicare, more than Social Security, more than defense. The government faces an impossible choice: cut spending massively, raise taxes dramatically, or print money to cover the gap. All three options destabilize the dollar. Maria, a retiree in Florida, watches her pension fund's quarterly report. Buried on page 47, Treasury bond allocation reduced from 40% to 28% due to yield concerns and geopolitical risk. She doesn't understand it, but her fund managers saw the same data China did. The dollar's share of global reserves sits at 56.3 to 57.7% as of 2025, down from 72% in 2000. That's a 14 to 16 percentage point decline over 25 years. At current rate, the dollar hits 50% around 2030 to 2032, but the rate is accelerating. The last few years have seen faster decline. If that pace continues, 50% could be reached by 2028. And here's the critical point. Once the dollar falls below 50% of global reserves, confidence breaks. Central banks worldwide start asking, if the dollar isn't dominant, why hold so much of it? Other countries see China reducing dollars. They follow. The shift accelerates. What was gradual becomes rapid. That's when the dollar loses reserve status. Not through Chinese attack, through market dynamics. Your savings, pension, mortgage. all denominated in a currency that central banks worldwide are quietly abandoning. Some nations and investors are diversifying. Physical gold and strategic commodities. Bitcoin and digital assets outside state control. Productive businesses with real-world value. Multiple currency exposure. But there's one thing nobody's talking about. What happens the day after the dollar falls? Financial war games conducted in 2024 modeled 3 scenarios. None of them are good. Scenario 1, managed decline. Probability 15%. The dollar remains a major currency, but not the dominant reserve. The world shifts to a multipolar currency system. Yuan for Asia, Euro for Europe, dollar for the Americas. No single crisis event, just gradual adjustment. This requires coordinated policy between the US and China. Stable geopolitics. Competent leadership globally. There's zero evidence of coordination. Tensions are escalating. Leadership in both countries is nationalist, not cooperative. Scenario 2, crisis transition. Probability 60%. A triggering event causes sudden loss of confidence. Taiwan conflict. US debt ceiling breach. Major bank failure. Federal Reserve policy error. China is forced to dump dollars defensively. Protect what's left of their reserves before they lose more value. The US retaliates. Sanctions. Asset freezes. Swift exclusion. Mutual financial destruction. Global financial crisis. Depression. Currency chaos. This stabilizes eventually, but only after massive wealth destruction. 3 to 7 years of economic contraction. Why is this likely? Historical precedent. Current geopolitical trajectory. Both nations preparing for conflict, not cooperation. Scenario 3, dual collapse. Probability 25%. The dollar's internal problems cause collapse before China escapes. Debt crisis. Inflation spiral. Loss of reserve status. China takes catastrophic losses on their $3.2 trillion in dollar holdings. Their economy implodes harder because they're still more dollar-dependent than admitted. Both superpowers face simultaneous financial crisis. Global trade freezes. Supply chains collapse. No winner. Both losers. Why is this possible? China's corporate sector has $3 trillion in dollar-denominated debt. When the dollar collapses and the yuan surges, that debt becomes unpayable. Corporate defaults cascade. Banking crisis in China. The yuan isn't yet trusted as a reserve alternative. During crisis, nobody wants to hold yuan. Flight to gold. Flight to tangible assets. Both currencies in crisis simultaneously. No scenario avoids pain. The best case is managed decline. The worst case is mutual annihilation. And the most likely case is somewhere between chaotic crisis and mutual destruction. This isn't about picking sides. It's not US versus China. The US and China built this trap together over 40 years. From 1980 to 2020, the relationship was win-win. China got to industrialize rapidly by exporting to the US. Hundreds of millions lifted out of poverty. China became the world's second-largest economy. The US got cheap manufactured goods. Walmart shelves stocked with $20 toasters and $50 televisions. American consumer purchasing power increased even as wages stagnated because everything became cheaper. US corporations got massive profits by offshoring production to China. Apple, Nike, GM, everyone. The stock market boomed. The US government got cheap financing. China recycled trade surplus dollars into Treasuries, keeping US interest rates low. This allowed the US to run massive deficits without consequence. Both sides benefited enormously. But the mechanism that created the benefit also created the trap. China's industrialization required dollar accumulation. The US's cheap goods required Chinese production. The interdependence became so deep that neither side could exit without destroying the system that benefited them. And now, 40 years later, the system is breaking down. China's labor costs are rising. Their exports are less competitive. The US's debt is unsustainable. Interest costs are exploding. The benefits are declining. But the trap remains. Both sides want out. But neither can leave without catastrophic cost. Think of 2 mountain climbers roped together on a cliff face. If one falls, both die. So they're both trying to find new anchors, new positions, new ways to secure themselves independently. But the process takes years. And the cliff is crumbling. Here's what finance evidence found that nobody else is reporting. China's October 2025 Treasury holdings data, not yet fully released to the public, shows another $30+ billion reduction. That's 3 consecutive months of acceleration. The exit isn't coming. It's happening now. You're watching the controlled demolition of the financial architecture that defined the post-World War II era. Both governments know it. Both are managing the decline, and neither is telling their citizens the full truth. Your currency, your savings, your economic future, all of it denominated in systems designed for a world that no longer exists. The 2008 crisis happened because regular people didn't see the mortgage collapse coming. Everyone trusted the ratings agencies, trusted the banks, trusted the system. This crisis is different. The evidence is visible. The data is public. China's Treasury sales are reported monthly. Their gold purchases are announced. Their Yuan settlement statistics are published. The only question is whether you're paying attention. Central banks are moving their money. Pension funds are reducing Treasury allocations. Sovereign wealth funds are buying gold and hard assets. The smart money isn't waiting for confirmation. They're positioning now. Because by the time the crisis is obvious to everyone, it's too late to protect yourself. If you knew your currency would lose 40% of its value in the next 5 years, but the exact timing was uncertain, would you move your savings now and risk being early? Or wait for confirmation and risk being too late? Comment your strategy below, because finance evidence is tracking every data point. And we'll show you what the central banks are doing with their money in the next video. Subscribe to Finance Evidence if you want the data nobody else is showing you.